Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Senior Style Guide Real Talk podcast. I'm your host, Sean Brown, once again. I know you're probably tired of hearing my voice, but we've got a new guest on today. We've got Kaya Bondurant from Kansas City, who runs Bondurant Studios, who is an absolutely phenomenal senior portrait photographer who's been in the game and knows what she's doing. I'm just stoked to have her on here and get her insight on a bunch of different topics today that I know are going to be so beneficial and helpful to guiding you in your journey. So welcome to the podcast, Kaya.
Thank you. It's very fun to be on. And we just met like a week or two ago and talked, and it was a pretty intense conversation. I was like, okay, tell me this. So I'm excited to be on the other side of it today.
It's awesome. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, you run your own podcast. So you're used to being on the other side of the mic, being the interviewee, and now you get, or interviewer, and now you get to be the interviewee.
Yes. So. Yeah. I like both for sure. Our podcast, From Nothing to Profit, I do with my friend Matt Hoagland, and we don't do it video because he's in Colorado and I'm in Kansas City. And so this is a fun experience to do video. I think this will be fun.
Yeah. So if you're listening on the podcast, we also do it on YouTube. So if you want to see our faces, then you actually get to see our conversation. So it's a very high-tech virtual Zoom call for our podcasts. But
very fancy.
Yes, we're very fancy here. So super stoked to have you on here. For those who don't know you or want to learn a little bit more about you, tell us about kind of who you are, what you do, and just kind of your, what you've done for the last, however many years.
You're trying to be careful. So my 7-word description of myself, that we did this a long time ago, like take a sentence, a 7-word sentence, and describe yourself. And mine is ready to be an eccentric old woman. So I love the idea of like Iris Apfel, or, the older you get, especially for women, the crazier you can dress and the more like outspoken you can be. And everyone's just like, oh, she's eccentric. So that's who I am. So I don't mind, celebrating the fact that I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time. But I can. So I went to college to be a missionary, and I did Spanish and secondary education and Spanish education. So that was what I did as a degree. And I got married, and my husband is a pastor. And then I started working for my mom while I was in college, and she had just started a photography business. So it was right at the very beginning. And I was helping in the business. So I didn't actually photograph. I just did sales and I did framing. And then when I graduated from college, I realized that I did not want to teach. And my husband and I lived in downtown Kansas City. So we did inner city missions work with kids. A lot of them were kids who had emigrated from Eritrea, which is part of Ethiopia, and from Kenya. And so we did missions work down there. So it was someone needed a job. Yeah. So I didn't want to teach. I student taught, and I was like, yeah, I was bored in school. Why would I be doing that? And so I told my mom, who had the photography studio, and she just started it a year before. I said, I think I want to do this. So she sent me to a week-long class with Larry Peters, if anyone knows who he is. And Darty Hines worked for him. I went to that class, and I looked around at all the photographers, and back then, I'm sure there are photographers like that now, but they were wearing socks with sandals, which is cool now, but was
it's like I was about to say that's like high trends up in the Pacific Northwest here.
Yeah, and suspenders, and I was looking around, and I was like, I think I could actually be a photographer. So I came home, and my mom handed me a camera and booked me full, like 5 shoots a day. And then a week later, when we got the film back, she handed me a light meter because I was like overexposing and underexposing everything. I didn't know what I was doing. And I shot like probably 300 sessions that summer. We had the business just blew up when she first started. We were doing photography that was so different. Like back then, everyone was like leaning on styrofoam numbers and, like studio backgrounds. And we were doing we were using Victoria's Secret poses, not to be sexy, but just that type of posing.
Yeah, just to be new and
different. Yeah. Well, just that's where we were getting our ideas, and then doing them in their outfits and going outside. It was totally groundbreaking. And so I learned really fast, and that's kind of where I started. And then we went digital 20 years ago with phase one and capture one, $80,000 investment in 2 cameras, which, you know, this baby is way better than those were back then. And so we made that transition, and kind of I moved, my husband took a job in another city, and so I moved away. It's kind of in the same Kansas City area, but you know, like almost an hour away. And I started my own business 8 years ago. So I've had really big businesses and shooting, you know, 400 seniors a year. And now I've kind of started my business and did 120 last year. So yeah. So.
And for a lot of those listening, that's 120 is still, that's volume right there.
I know. And it's so weird because I only work like 2 to 3 days a week. I have assistants, and then I have a really great studio manager who also shoots. And so I feel like I'm lounging around all the time. You know, I'm like, I'm only shooting 8 sessions this week. You know, like if I feel like I'm laying around, you know, not really doing anything. But yeah.
So let's talk about the difference between why you maybe wanted to transition from, you know, that 400, or even just maybe a shift in the industry that you saw that you really wanted to kind of move into this different market.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because they talk about IPS, right? And it's like a big,
for those who don't know what IPS is, in-person.
I was going there. Yeah. In-person sales. And so it was before we did in-person sales, we gave everyone a proof, and the proof cost $1 a piece. You know, so if they got 24 proofs, that cost me $24 plus my time, just right there off the bat. And so we switched over to in-person sales with digital or with the negatives, you know, putting them up on the screen. And so when we did that, we lost clients. You know, each time that you make a rule, you know, we weren't sending out the proofs anymore, you know, kind of like we weren't putting up online for people. And so we lost clients. So each step that we were making our, taking it to a higher end experience, we would lose volume, and then we'd have to, you know, regain that volume. So we never said, oh, I don't want to shoot as much, which that's kind of trendy and cool to be able to do. But to me, if more people want to give me more money, I want to figure out how to make it work and just streamline the process rather than cut it down. I don't feel that need. I like more is more, and maybe some more on top of that, you know, like it's my personal style. It's how I like to do life. And so when during the recession in 2008, our numbers dropped because really the middle class stopped coming, you know? And so we kept the high end, but not that middle. So it's kind of sad, you know, now I don't know when this will air, but I think that there's going to be some middle people dropping out again.
Let's talk about that a little because, because we are, you know, we're still in kind of this COVID-19 era where we don't necessarily know when or how hard, you know, when the economy is going to bounce back / how hard it's been truly hit.
Yes. Sure.
And so I think you are right in that we are going to see a lot of shifts in what you said, that middle. So kind of go over what you saw back in 2008 and maybe what you think is going to happen here in 2020.
Well, so one of the things that was most interesting in 2008 is before that happened, the seniors would come in and they would buy like 4 or 5 big wall framings. And, you know, everything we would suggest, they would just buy it. The seniors wanted it. They were like, oh my gosh, yes, you need to buy me all of this. And then after that, they came in and they were like, no, mom, I don't want you to spend that much. You can't buy that. That's embarrassing. You know, that conspicuous consumption was super in, and then it went out. And I feel like we were coming back toward it. My seniors were pushing. They wanted more stuff. They were used to having money poured into them with their, you know, competitive cheer and competitive dance and all their activities, and they were getting nice cars and branded clothing. And so we've worked really hard to make our senior brand, which is Style Muse Magazine, to make that brand a, like, you know, the designer brand of senior photography in our area. And so we're really going for those kids who are like, let's buy everything, Mom. I want it all. And so I think that they're that maybe in a year or 2 years, it might be an immediate reaction, but I think that the kids are going to be seeing, the struggle or be affected by it. And that's going to be harder to sell because the parents are used to listening to their kids. Gen Z parents and millennial parents want to make their kids happy.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it's interesting that you kind of saw that shift in 2008 too.
Mm-hmm.
And my take on it is I actually think that those on the higher end might actually be less affected because and what's interesting about that is if you kind of look at, unemployment numbers are up and all that stuff, but if you really truly look at the number of people that have been affected kind of at, more stable, not necessarily hourly jobs, which is kind of like that higher end clientele, it's been a little bit more stable than those who might be.
It is, but I think it's going to trickle up. Essentially, I think if the people on the bottom don't have the money to do, get the mortgages or buy the things or, then it's
build
just
a new home. And
but on another note, I do think that this is very different than just an economic recession. This is not. This is a life-changing situation. And the juniors are going to remember that their prom, that they didn't get to finish their prom. They're going to remember that they didn't get to do their track and baseball seasons. And so in the past, the kind of the nerdy kids would bring in all their stuff, or the kids that were like the super achievers. But, to get a girl to bring in a prom dress was really hard because they're like, oh, I just want to wear my regular, our high-end girls did not want to bring in, they would bring in their competitive cheer, but only one. They wouldn't bring in their school cheer outfit. They didn't want to take pictures of all their stuff and all their activities. But now I think they're going to roll up with a car full of memories that they don't want to miss out on. And so I have literally maybe photographed one cap and gown in my whole career. I have. Now it's coming. 15 on the books right now. They're all coming in to get their cap and gowns. It's a free session, but once we show it, it's going to be a thing, So I think that nostalgia and capturing the memories, it's just, we're going to be able to milk that.
Well, and going off of that, we as some seniors, senior photos are the only thing about senior year that they got to have.
I know. And they are posting those babies. They are making a big deal out of it. And so, it is crazy.
Yeah. So I think, honestly, I choose to be on the optimistic side of things where I think this is actually, for the senior industry specifically, I think it's going to be something that's very powerful because this is what we did to capture their senior year and ultimately save it in some regard.
Oh yeah. And the sophomores, juniors, and freshmen have spent the last month on social media watching what we're doing. And so they're a captive audience and they're connecting with us. And I know you've been active on social media. I've followed a lot of senior photographers and all those relationships that we've made that we don't even know we've made they're going to help our business.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but even in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, engagement has been through the roof for just a photo that I would post that normally would get half the engagement as usual. Mm-hmm. It's double because people are on their phones and they're looking to us as kind of leaders in their communities right now.
Yeah. Something pretty and happy and entertaining. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we can, in the future, there's no question okay, so before, when I would market to seniors, I never wanted to use the pain points. I always wanted to talk about the happy things. I don't really like pain. So I don't want to talk about anything painful. But the reality is they've been through something painful. So they're going to connect to that so much easier. And so I feel like using those pain points, don't miss those memories, capture that. You never know what's going to come up. So get in, get your session done. Boys need to capture those memories too. You can't just take pictures of them in their uniform by the side of the track. Not if they don't even get a track season, let's get it all. Let's make sure we get it all. So I think we can push that button and really maximize that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. What do you think is to come, let's say in the next 2 to 3 years for the industry as a whole?
Well, I'm curious. It's one of the transitions that we've made. Like I think I talked about it at the very beginning, but we used to sell all kinds of wall decor, and then that was not cool anymore. And then when I transitioned to having my own studio, I actually did just digital for a little while because I didn't want to mess with it. Honestly, just a little bit of laziness. And then now, just recently, we've gone to albums, and so we make sure we print something of every image that goes out of the studio. I had a good friend pass away, and I could not find the digital files of the family pictures I had taken of her. A lot of my old hard drives from 10 years ago weren't. I couldn't make them work. But she had a little album that I had printed from her, and I used those images to use for the family and the services and that kind of thing. And it made me realize that, like, it was such a touch point. When you say things need printed, it doesn't really connect. But when something like that happens, and you think, I couldn't get to those digital files, and there's no guarantee that my digital files on Dropbox are going to be there tomorrow. Like all of that could be gone. So we do print something for every client. And I think that yard signs and banners and all that stuff that they were like embarrassed to do before, they're going to go crazy about next year. I'm going to put those in my sales room and use those as bonuses next year.
Yeah, it was the whole yard sign craze. I think that every senior photographer who wasn't previously doing yard signs had like 4 or 5 clients text them asking if we were all of a sudden going to be offering these yard signs. I was like, what the hell is a yard sign? I know. Like, look it up. Yeah.
I was so mad. So one of the things is I really do not like designing invitations and things like that. I've just, it's not the markup is not there. It's, you do it, then they have you change it 100 times. I mean, I know you can set up systems and stuff, but it's still just not as fun as taking pictures. Yeah. And so when those yard signs came up, I was so mad because I saw all the senior photographers were posting their designs, and I was like, why isn't somebody sharing this with me? And so I actually I gave away a design. I don't know when this will air, but if you want, we can put the freebie on it. Because so what we did, because I didn't want to do a $35 yard sign and spend 15 minutes designing it. Like that is, I want to do something else. And so we made a $500 package that included the yard sign and included a signature print, included, a few senior graduation announcements. And so we made that. And then, so if they spend $500 and I spend 30 minutes designing it, I made a lot more money on it.
A little bit more worth your time.
Yeah. So if you want that, I'll give you that freebie. You can put.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes for people who are still figuring out how to design these yard signs
or using it next year.
Yeah, exactly, and introducing it into your 2021 packages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your transition from high volume to that low volume, and in terms of maybe what you found in that process in terms of having more time, more freedom. Did you find yourself more creative?
Okay, well, so let me say this. I also photograph families and children. And so I've done the only year I didn't shoot probably 200 sessions. So I was shooting about 200 sessions for, 10 years maybe. But then when I switched over to my own business, I did 80 that fall. And then I've done like 120 to 180 sessions. So I've never really done low volume. Like that wasn't a creative thing. But I'll tell you a big transition. So I have 4 kids. My oldest is 20. My youngest is 12. And I've been a professional photographer all the way through, working essentially, full-time, supporting our family a lot of the time. And when my daughters were 2.5 and 5 months, my nanny took them to the city to get lunch for everyone. And we were in a smaller town about 40 minutes outside of the city. And she was, a car in front of her dropped off a piece of metal, and she hit the piece of metal and did a rollover car wreck. And EMTs, people saw it that I knew. Lots of people saw it, pulled up. When the EMTs pulled up, they just assumed everyone had died. Like there were she had bought, she'd gone to the store and got like some toys. And so it was like toys strewing the road up into this SUV that was like smashed and upside down. And she had put them in the seatbelts really, really well. We ended up being on all the TV channels about how they saved their lives and being in seatbelts. My husband is a pastor. He was fasting and praying lunch that day, which is when it happened, which is super crazy. But that changed things for me. And I was working like 50 or 60 hours. I had a nanny. They were at the studio with me. And I was like, I'm done doing that. I'm done working that many hours. And so I've committed since then to essentially work 2.5 days a week. And that is what really changed things for me. And so, if people, so I don't work on the weekends. I don't work on evenings. I like to work on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and part of a Friday. Like those are the days that I like to work. So I do think about my business a lot and I do work on things, but I don't go in and shoot more than 3 days a week ever. So as far as creativity, that's a different question. So maybe we don't have to go into that one.
Yeah. Well, let's touch on it. You say 2.5 days a week, but your studio is probably, and you're not just open necessarily 2.5 days a week because you still have editing to do. Yeah. What sort of systems, maybe for a photographer who's even looking, excuse me, who's looking to go from 50 seniors and down to 30 or streamline their process? What type of systems do you feel like you need to have in place in order to maximize ultimately your efficiency?
Well, I have really fantastic people that work for me. And so we talk about that all the time. That's just their personality. I think it's so funny because I'm not a new photographer. So I've done exactly this way for 20 years. I shoot the pictures. I put them in Capture One. I edit them. I move them over. I retouch them less now than I used to, which takes more time when you want to make it look like you're retouching less. And then I put them in a slideshow. They come in, view, order, and then we deliver the digital files and edit the images to go. So that's my process and has always been my process. What we're working on more and what keeps changing is the way that we book the clients and the way we get them in. So, I don't know. I know that there is a streamlined process, obviously, because otherwise it would take me forever to do it. But I think it'd be very specific on the specific programs and that type of thing.
Yeah. Let's shift gears away from photography a little bit. What gets you going, or what are you obsessed about that's not photography related?
Well, I'm a soccer mom and a dance mom. So for years, that's what we've done in the evenings, take our kids, and they're in competitive sports and we love it. So we like going and watching them. And my 15-year-old son is, right now looking at colleges and, getting prepared for that. So I love that. My husband's a pastor and I teach preschool classes at church and I love that. I read normally 3 or 4 books a week. And then I'm super into embroidery right now. I started in September, and because my kids, I don't have to run them to things as much. Our 18-year-old and 20-year-old drive themselves places. And so I do that. I just kind of started it, and it's like a super millennial trend. I don't know if it's all if you look on social media, all these millennials are posting all their embroidery and they have classes and stuff. So.
I've seen actually a few embroidery stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my latest thing that I'm interested in.
Super cool. Let's talk with you being super involved with their extracurriculars. How did you view senior portraits from not just a photography perspective, but from a parent perspective, now that you've probably, I assume, gone through kind of 2 iterations of senior photos for your own kids?
I think senior portraits are too late.
Are too what? Sorry, you cut out.
Too late. Honestly, because kids are active in their sports and activities the most between their 7th and 9th grade years. And then they really start dropping off because you don't do high school sports unless you are, and it, like our schools in the Kansas City area where we are, there are about 400 kids in the class. And so unless you're in a small town, which is what I grew up in, I played every sport and got recruited for college basketball, but I'm only 5'6" and I can't, like, my vertical is like an inch, you know? So it
Your
just,
vertical is better than mine.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I worked really hard, but I was at a super small school, so you stand out and that type of thing. I wouldn't even have played sports probably in the schools my kids are in. And so I feel sad because a lot of times the seniors come in and they're like, well, I used to do competitive soccer. I used to do cheerleading. I feel sad because you're not really getting to show their love and their activities by the time they're a senior. So both of my daughters did soccer and dance, and both of them were either dropped out or not really doing it to the same extent by the time they were seniors in high school.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I haven't really thought about that before. That's just a new answer.
Well, let's give you something else to think about. Where do you see a fit for photography before senior photos? Tweens,
I've
teens?
really tried to work on it. The hard part is they're just so busy because they are so involved in things. And so I have clients that I've photographed their kids since they're babies. And so those ones I can get in. And I do that with my own kids. I just drag them into the studio and I'm like, we have to shoot this. And then I pay them $20 and then I get them ice cream afterwards so that they'll smile.
A little bribe. And
Yeah. I've had some serious bribes go on, but yeah, I'm every year or two, I just bring them in with their sports and activities and try to get pictures of them. So I think volume is such a great way to go. It's just not my personality. I don't really make that happen, but yeah.
Well, it's so interesting to hear you say that you think that it's too late, where a lot of parents almost feel like it's too early for senior photos, where it's like, oh, it's just senior year. Mm-hmm. And then they go through a child or two and it's like, oh, my baby is the youngest one is finally leaving. Like, we need to capture this. And I'm sure that you've probably gotten it where they've had 2 or 3 older and didn't really see a need for senior photos. And it takes them a time or two to really catch on and realize the importance and the gravity that senior year holds.
Yeah. And I think if you do a good job of making it, connecting with the family, that, getting the younger siblings is way easier than getting the first one and educating them. It's funny, this new business, I've ended up getting the youngest a lot, which is always sad. I'm like, really? I could have photographed all your older kids and I'm ending up getting, but the younger ones, I think, are the ones who say, this is what I want to do. I don't care how much it costs. They can reach for the higher end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When I almost wonder how much of a shift it is from, even in one family, you can go from kind of a millennial mindset into more of a Gen Z mindset too. So and you're really kind of, tied in with that Gen Z. What have you seen in trends that Gen Z have really latched onto?
Well, they like brands. I mean, you think about it. My 15-year-old son has, I don't know how many pairs of tennis shoes, and he's very careful with them. Doesn't want them to get messed up. That's so different than the way it's been in the past. And then my the Lululemon, the Kendra Scott, they've obviously, those are old brands in our area. They're segueing into new things, but brands are a big deal for sure. And so I think for a long time, being a photographer was all about being personal and connecting, making it about you and the senior. And I've never been very good at that because we were a brand 15 years ago and nobody even knew who their photographer would be. It was either my mom or myself, or I had a cousin that worked for us, or another girl. We all had curly hair and we just acted like we were each other, we're like, oh,
yeah.
We say our name really fast. I don't know who's taking their picture, but we're back to the brand. I think you can really be more of a brand and not have to be so in their face personal now. You can, and that's not bad, but
that's super interesting because I would almost say the opposite, where I think that they are really connected with those personal brands and they want to know who.
Personal brands, yes, but I don't think that it has to be me.
Yeah.
So I have employees and they run our social media, and the social media, we show our faces, but it's not like it's about our the girls were photographing and about them, and we're, it's more about their story, not as much about us. And I don't know, I don't really like seeing old people without makeup on my Instagram stories. I'm not bashing anyone. Go for it. That's great. But that's just not, I'm like, well, swipe. So I like making it about my seniors and about pretty young things. So,
well, I think that gets to the heart of it is do what you feel resonates with your own brand.
Oh, for
sure. I think that there are photographers who do it extremely well. And I think that there are photographers who, like you said, really don't have any interest in being a part of that. And they steer their brand very successfully in a completely different direction.
Yeah, for sure.
What's been your biggest light bulb moment lately?
Oh, like yesterday?
Anything. Say last like
I'm a light bulber. Like the light bulb comes on so much. I've been looking at email funnels, and like my light bulb moment was that a nurture email funnel and a sales email funnel are both different. A sales email funnel from a lead generator and a nurture email funnel are both different than what we really need, because we need like an actual like inquiry email funnel that goes along with all the inquiries.
Let's break those down.
Pardon?
Let's break those down for people listening. So we've got lead gen, and so are you kind of grouping like lead gen, sales, nurture sequence all together, and then inquiry sequence?
No. So I was so confused about what to do. People are always like, you need to make an email funnel and take your clients through it. And I kept trying to make them and, give away a lead generator, like what to wear for your senior session. And then, put the things that would follow up afterwards with it. Or I was trying to make a monthly email, which is more of a nurture campaign. And I just, I do, the story, let's see what it's called. The Story Brand University. I can't think of what it's called. Have you heard of it?
I'm guessing it's by Donald Miller or whatever.
Yeah. It's his Business Made Simple University. That's what it is. And so it's only like $200, but they have this great email funnel education in it. And I was watching that, and it just totally simplified everything for me. So I realized what I need to do for my business and how to think about it all. It was just all super confusing. I didn't understand it. And so now I've realized what I need to break it down. And so my most important thing to make is a set of emails to go to the clients that are not quite ready to book. So like a not ready to book inquiry email set. You probably have one already because you seem really organized.
I have a couple different sequences, yeah. But it's interesting because a lot of photographers say we don't want to do emails because seniors don't read them.
Right.
And I get that. I think that a lot of seniors necessarily don't read them, but I also think that we're writing emails in the completely wrong way and not getting them to read them. Because if you've seen, I actually book quite a high percentage of people off of my email list that's kind of a combination of just a nurture. And I almost use it as a deeper client experience for them to learn even more, broken down into bite-sized information that's literally like a 15-second read email.
Yeah.
30 seconds. And so it's interesting to see you putting more time into email, because I do think that there's a lot of merit behind email as a sales and a brand tool. And I think that a lot more photographers should be utilizing it.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think too, it's always been tricky for me because I've had, I have a really great family business too. And then I used to shoot all the covers of a local children's, like the top local children's magazine. And then I used to shoot lots of babies. I think as you go through your own life cycle, your clients kind of follow that. And so I just never knew who to email, who to email, because a senior email is way different than a baby email. And I need to make 10 different things. And it was just way too much work.
Senior email is different than a baby email?
Yeah, weird. I know. Yeah. Crazy. So it was a lot of work. So that's been the thing, like my word of the year for my business is automate. And so just figuring out what to automate and how we're actually can utilize it day to day in the business is because I don't do all of that. I have, my studio manager does all of that. We have to work through like how it will work and what she thinks is going to work well.
Well, and that's the same thing for why it's so important to have these systems, especially when you have multiple people, because it could be you, it could be your studio assistant, it could be a number of people actually touching it. And so having those systems in place is immensely needed. Yeah. So that's where I'm at. My light bulb moment is the thing that I need to do next, because I always have so many ideas of things I want to do. And so that helped me to figure out the very next thing to do. I love it. I think the idea of doing a sequence for people who aren't ready to book is crucial for every single photographer out there.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself going next in your business or your life?
Oh, sorry.
Why just buzzing your window?
A big fly. I'm trying to fly out my big window. Yeah. Well, so let's see. It was 8 years ago that we moved from a small town to essentially Kansas City, and we moved our family, and then I was in a 8,000 square foot studio space, all kinds of amazing things, and then I went to a little garage with like plexiglass over the door, and I've built up from there, and so now in August, and we're in the spring, so 8 months ago, I bought my studio building that I had been renting. That is 2,500 square feet of commercial space, and then it also has a condo upstairs, and I rent that out. And so next for me is to pay for that. And we have a 12-year-old, so 6 more years of having kids for sure dependent on us. We told them all we're going to kick them out at 18, but I like that once they turn 18, then I like them. I'm like, well, now I want you to stay around.
Now you can stay here.
Yeah, I really like you. So, as far as what I see going next, so my studio, I really like to develop people that work for me. Everyone who's worked for me, unless they didn't, unless I fired them within a day or two, most of them have worked for me for 8 or 10 or 12 years. It's a really long process. And so I really like developing people. And so what I would like to see happen is for the business to grow more, shooting more, developing more in our business to business, as far as photography education and photographing local businesses. I have 5 different directions that I want to grow. So, and I want people to work for me that I can develop. Yeah.
Super cool. Mm-hmm. As we kind of wrap up, I always I'll give you a second to think about this because sometimes I put people on the spot, but I'm going to have you ask one question to everyone listening. So you can kind of it can be about business. It can be about life, literally anything. It can be a selfish question. If there's a little, poll that you want to post or questionnaire or whatever. But before we get there, what is one piece of advice that you would give to photographers who are maybe just starting or looking to take that next step in their business?
What percentage of the photographers would you guess are women, or the listeners?
Probably a 65-35 split, if not more.
Really? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume it's even more. But I'm going to speak to the women here in my advice, especially the ones that are starting, because young men like you, if you're going to be a photographer, you charge for it. This is your job. You're going to have to, we may not be in the society we used to be, but still a man who's going to do a job is I'm going to have to pay for things. I've got to take care of things. If I'm going to do this, I need to make as much as I would working for someone else. So women devalue themselves across the board. And I love Ben and my sons, and I don't ever want to say women are better or anything like that, but I think women devalue themselves. They don't value their time. And so my advice is, if you're starting into the business, you need to get paid, and you should not do it not do it and not get paid enough. I have a friend who's a photographer, and we've talked multiple times. She does it on the side, and she cleans houses to make the majority of her money. And she does good photography and charges less than what she does to clean a house. She's picking up gross stuff off of people's bathroom floors instead of saving up money to send her kids to college. And I just think that is so wrong. That is so wrong. And if you're going to spend the time and the money and the energy to learn how to do this business, then you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to the photography industry, and you owe it to your clients to make money. And
I said last question, but I want to riff off this a little bit because I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah.
What do you think needs to happen for those individuals who don't value themselves to just kind of wake up?
I think they need to realize that people expect to spend $1,200 to $1,500. That's just expected. Everywhere in the U.S., you can get $1,200 to $1,500, especially the small towns, because they will put pictures on their walls. The people in the fancy cities won't put the pictures on their walls a lot of times. And so I think there should be a industry standard of what we expect people to spend. Honestly, I think the $4,000 range will make your business, make you get less clients because people will talk too much. And so if you're doing a $4,000 average, you need to be careful, because that's going to, there's going to be attrition. But between $1,500 to $4,000, $1,200 to $4,000, $1,000 to $4,000, whatever, that can give you a business, and people need to pay that much for 2 to 3 hours of your shooting time and editing and sales.
Yeah, I know you and I are both right in that range, and we've seen our businesses really be able to thrive and be profitable that way. And I think it's, I think that you as a photographer who's charging $2,000 can have just as many clients as the photographer that's charging $200. And I truly believe that, as long as, obviously your skills are at a point where people feel comfortable and trust you with the camera. But I think it's very doable. I think a lot of photographers think, if I charge less, I'll book more. And I think that that's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times if you're doing the cheaper sessions, you're shooting on the evenings, you're shooting on the weekends, you're taken away from your family, you're editing, until midnight. I don't do any of that. I read until midnight, and I watch TV with my family. It is, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not valuing yourself enough, and you just have to get the guts to do it. Yeah. Agreed.
Kai, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, I sent you a whole bunch of links, so it depends on what you want to know about me. I have a personal Instagram account that I actually post a lot of senior pictures on. That's my name, at Kaya Bondurant. And then I have a senior Instagram account. It's at Style Muse Magazine. And so those would be the first two places you could go. I just made a Facebook group. I've never had one before, called Kaya, but I think it's Kaya's Facebook Friends or Kaya Bondurant's Facebook Friends. I don't remember.
So new, you don't even know the name. So
no, it's seriously, it is that new. And it's not going to be like I want it to just be like where I push out my ideas, push out information. So if you want to have access to me as a photographer. But I mean, I like to talk to people and I like to make friends. So people can DM me anywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Super cool. And then I didn't forget, what's that one question that you want to ask our listeners? If you're listening on the podcast, you can screenshot this and tag at Kaya Bondurant and myself and Senior Style Guide. Well, just so we can see your response and answer the question over there. Or if you're in the YouTube comments, just comment down below and we'll comment right back. But what is that one question that you want to ask our viewers?
I would like for our listeners today, to go to their social media or onto their phone and ask, what 3 words would you use to describe me and or my style, my shooting style or my personal style? So what 3 words would you use to describe me? The reason that I think that's an important question to ask is because as you move in your photography journey, we all start out copying what we've seen, and that's just the way you learn as an artist. But then as you grow in your business and as you grow in your craft, differentiating yourself and showing who you are and your personality and your work is important. So when I did that, my 3 words, and I used to do women's events where I would do like a booth and people would walk by and talk to me, and they would always say this to me. They would say, "Your photography is so vibrant. I love all of your colors." So my words are vibrant, authentic, and inspirational. So those 3 words are what I use to give direction to my business and my photography. So I would love to hear and see what everyone's 3 words are.
I love it. And it's mine. One of mine is actually the same as yours, which is authentic, but modern and clean are the 3.
Very different. Mine is not clean. My authenticity is intentionally like messy and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. I love that question. I think it's good. And one of the tips that I always give photographers when they were when they're first trying to find their style is, like you said, people always get so caught up in copying others and trying to emulate people that they see as success. And that's totally okay when, to get you a first direction. Yeah. But over time, like you said, you need to differentiate yourself. And so for those struggling to break out, what I even say is go to your Instagram feed and find like the 3 or 5 photos that you really loved creating, like that just resonate with you, that you wish every single session you could produce that type of photo, and really hone in on that and use that as your direction too. But pairing that with the 3 words, I think you're going to see immense success in changing the trajectory of your business potentially. So thank you so much for being on. That was absolutely amazing. And I'm sure that there are tons of individuals who are going to be messaging you with their 3 words and reaching out to you about that. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Real Talk. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks for having me.